Welcome to another podcast episode. So today I'm going to be talking about everything I learned from my 4.5 to 5 year relationship. A little bit nervous. I need to be very unbiased and respectful, but I got in a relationship from quite young, 15 to 20. So I feel like I have a lot of things that I can share now, just to help everyone. And I'd like to get my friends on to talk about their relationship dramas, and every relationship's different, but I don't want to include everything. I'm just going to highlight some key points that I felt like I've taken away from it, that a bit about myself, but also what I would expect in my next relationship. And yeah, hopefully it kind of helps people, or you can relate to parts of this. So yeah. First thing I want to talk about is kind of how I took my first relationship. This was my first proper relationship. Got into it when I was 15. At a time in my life where I was very, very low. So the person I was with kind of was like a godsend to me, and I was like, wow, this person is amazing. And really become anxious attachment style to that. And throughout the whole relationship, there was a lot of high highs, there was some really good moments. But when the lows were low, for me, they were very, very low. Because, and I'll get into it later, but the lows were very triggering to me, and things that would really bring out the worst in me and my anxiety and everything, and it was really hard times. So that really high and then really low creates an addiction to someone, and it's very hard to have a healthy outlook on love in that sense, because it's a little bit all over the place, and I took things very personally. I didn't have a secure sense of self, so I'll get into projecting insecurities and everything later. There's a lot of things I can look back on and think I was not in the best space or headspace to be feeling such extreme emotions for someone. The problem with that is when I kind of felt someone retreating away from me or was mad at me or whatever, I would overly go over the top, as in I would do anything, say anything, buy anything. I was very much we need to fix this now, there's a problem and it needs fixing. So I was a very over the top, and I was just very relaxed and laid back. So it become a little bit of a power imbalance in that sense, because I was very much it become a routine that was very subconscious, and neither of us knew what we were doing at the time. But at the time it was kind of anytime there was any sense of conflict or tension, I'd overextend myself, and subconsciously, and it's no one's really fault apart from mine in that sense, is I would do anything no matter what, because I had such an attitude to this relationship, and subconsciously that kind of trains a power imbalance. Even if none of you realise it, none of you are being malicious, naturally there's a power imbalance of this person being above me and me chasing every need and want of this person. Naturally that creates different levels of respect. Even if you don't notice it, I feel naturally when there's a power imbalance, one person's going to respect someone more than the other. And for me, I always say how respect is way more important than just love. Because if you don't respect a person, you don't respect if you don't have empathy for them, kind of seeing it in their shoes or whatever, you're going to butt heads a little bit. And I think for me, I learned the most important things about anxious attachment styles and avoidant attachment styles, and how it's necessarily no one's fault in that sense, but you will clash. I know some anxious avoidance work, but I think the biggest thing as I learned is that we were clashing a lot, and pretty much throughout the whole thing, and because we were so committed to it, we were kind of ignoring that, pushing that under the rug for a while. And I think that is the biggest thing I've learned, is when there is a power imbalance, there is a different level of respect that over the years will probably start to break down. And when you're clashing, because you might deal with things in one way versus them, it doesn't always work. And I think the most important thing to think is, if that is not working, if you are clashing, you can respect and love each other as a person, but you're not meant to intertwine. And I think that's the hardest thing anyone can come to terms with, is loving someone so much or being so like happy, but you actually don't, you're not compatible and you actually don't get on. And you'll see that in a relationship, because relationships bring out the best parts and the worst parts of you. And in those worst moments, if you can resolve a situation really like successfully and move on, then that works quite well. But if it's like constantly brought back up and then reactions start to get even more intense, and then it turns into a bit of a drama, that's clashing, and that it's something's not working. And no matter how many times you revisit that topic or whatever, I think sometimes you have to come to the acceptance of you're just two completely different personalities and you're not going to see this world in the same way. With the respect element, it links to my point of communication. So communication's always been my number one like big thing in a relationship, and I think it should be for everyone. I think if we worked on how we communicate within our relationships, friendships or whatever, the world would be a better place. I think I can admit that my communication wasn't great either, because as girls tend to do, me and my friends are terrible at this, is like when we're upset about things, we tend to not bring them up all the time and just show it in our face, in our attitude or whatever it can be. So there'd be a lot of times where maybe I wasn't quite happy about something and I probably didn't bring it up, and it would have been a lot easier to just say it or phone or like text or do something. And it probably would have been easier, but in my mindset, I was like, this is going to cause a big blow up, and I would do everything I could to avoid that because of like my fear of abandonment. And I think the one thing I've learned is just do it. My biggest advice is literally just do it, because if you have a problem with something and you say it, you're either one, going to be met with respect and like solve the problem and great, or you're going to be met with like disrespect and like you're wrong. And that is fine, because as I talk about, the quicker you find out, the better. Like, we don't have time to lose. So I would rather now say it with chest and see what reaction I get back. That reaction is going to tell me everything I need to know about, is me and this person going to work? And I wish I'd just done that more often, and it would have highlighted to me either good or bad what type of person this was, and if it was going to match with me. I feel like that's my, like, as girls, like, or boys, like whoever, if you're someone that doesn't really like confrontation because you're scared of the outcome, but then you're like bottling things up and it ends up coming out anyway, just say it. It's probably so much easier for the other person and for yourself to not bottle up and go crazy, because if you do bottle up and go crazy, then you're obviously going to look like the bad guy and your reactions aren't going to be justified. So just say it, because your worst fear of them turning around and being horrible will just highlight that they're not meant for you. So we kind of have to get rid of this fear of like loneliness or abandonment or them leaving us, because that is not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is staying with someone that is not right for us. On the other side with communication is, I really find it important. I feel like when you're in a secure relationship, you really love and respect each other, you would communicate. Like when you're having an off day and you don't really want to talk, or you know, if you're going out, you'd message an update, and you're a partnership. Like, yes, you are individuals, but if you're in a relationship, you are a partnership, and that's something you have to respect. So I think communicating and updating someone is so important, and I think if you can't do that, then you're not ready for a relationship at all. I think if you're having a bad day and you can't express that to your partner, that is not gonna work in the long term. I feel like it's difficult for people that don't know how to express their emotions, but it is a key staple that keeps relationships together, to be able to say like, I'm struggling, I'm having a bad day, I'm not in the best moods to talk or meet or whatever, and then for the other person to respect that. Kind of withholding that information or going out on nights out or whatever and not keeping your partner sort of in the loop is only going to send them further away and trust you less, even if nothing's going on. It creates like a sense of anxiety, and if you're doing it over time, it's going to become a routine and a habit, and it is eventually going to blow up. So I think to avoid any blow ups or any like accusations or any sort of secrecy, like keeping it 100% transparent and real is always going to be 10 times better than hiding things or withholding information or not fully explaining how you feel, because that's where confusion happens and it gets so confusing and mixed up. So I just say everything with chest on both ends. I should say more with chest, Like, whoever I'm seeing should be able to say more with chest and keep each other in the loop with feelings, with your day-to-day life, and just communication in general. So another thing that I can say I definitely used to do was, you cannot bring up past issues to kind of use against them if you have already forgiven them. I think it's really unfair, and looking back it is unfair. The problem is with this is something will happen, and when you're like so infatuated by someone and you don't want any confrontation, you don't want them to leave you, you might not say everything you needed to say in the moment, or you might not even tell them that you're annoyed about a situation and move on really quickly. But the problem with that is you have not like resolved that, and that will definitely come back to bite you in the future, and then you'll mention it again and the other person will be confused because it was in the past, and then it all gets a little bit complicated. So I think if something has happened, you need to 100% break it down and revisit it. And if it's going to take you a while, then that's fine, but you have to like tell that. You can't just be like, everything's fine, and then bring it back up another time. I think for me, like, I just had such bad anxiety of certain things happening again, or certain things that I didn't feel secure about that would like keep happening, and I hadn't quite like nipped it in the bud, so it just would keep popping back up. And then obviously that person could have changed, might not even do those things anymore, so it's not really fair to throw that back. But it is difficult when I feel like I also wasn't met with a lot of reassurance on those things either. So I think reassurance is another thing that's key. I think if you're quite an anxious person or quite an insecure person, you have a duty of care to go to heal that and find yourself as an independent person where nothing should really shake you. That's you kind of coming halfway. But then the other person should be able to have that sense of like reassurance and empathy, and meet you in the halfway to make you feel secure, and then there should not be any problems. But when you don't have someone reassuring you and you feel quite insecure and anxious, like, you're never going to be able to trust or meet in the middle. So you definitely need to make sure these situations are bedded before you move on. I think something big as anxiety just does push people further away. I think when you have a proper anxiety disorder, obviously you want to be with someone that understands that, and that's fine. But when you have anxiety over that person, I think the biggest thing I've taken away from that is it's just not worth it. Like, if you've constantly got anxiety about something and you don't feel secure, it's not been bedded, and it's never been like sorted, there's no point staying around, because you'll always feel anxious. I don't think you'll ever fully trust that situation or that person until it's fully bedded, or you just start fresh completely. And I think that was the one thing, is like, it's difficult because you can feel consumed by anxiety and you're so not safe, you don't feel safe at all. But then the other person eventually starts to get a bit annoyed because they could be not doing anything wrong, and they're confused while you're fighting against this. So it's a two-way street. But I think to resolve that would be, you heal a little bit, therapy and whatever, and for your anxiety. And as long as you're getting met with the reassurance and these situations are being bedded, there should be nothing to bring back up and have anxiety over. I think a lot of the things I managed to keep bringing back up were things that were never resolved and never reassured. So kind of makes sense, but my reactions got worse, and then my reactions weren't justified and probably weren't fair. So it's a two-way street, and it's a really hard thing because both of you have to be committed to make that type of thing work. Okay, so like another thing would be, don't try to change yourself to meet them. I think a hard thing with me is I didn't really know myself when I first got into that relationship. So when I started to develop more of a personality and I still had this like fear of abandonment, I was just terrified that this person would meet the new me and not like it. And that was really scary. So I would like hide and dull things down, or there'd be jokes or comments made about certain things, and I would then avoid those things at all costs. Certain music, or like some things about my appearance, or like just little things. I'd be like, right, we're just not going to show that, do that, say that, because that's not the personality that he wants. And that was so bad because I constantly just felt like not myself and judged when I did like let it slip a little bit. And then I just kind of realised that I was just not being my authentic self like at all. because I just felt kind of like mocked when I was. So I don't know, I just feel like be true to yourself, always be 100% yourself, even if that does change. I think we're so scared of like people leaving, and it's like, no, like you've got to be 100% yourself, because if that person likes it, they will stay. The worst thing is that they don't like it, they leave, and they're not meant for you. Why would you want to be with someone that's not meant for you? As I say with the jigsaw puzzle analogy, like stop jamming the wrong bit of the jigsaw into your puzzle, because like I would much rather have that bit empty than like the wrong piece in. Do you know what I mean? So I think we have to get rid of this fear. And do you know what's I think the main problem in this society is a lot of us, and mainly females, I think it's maybe like the whole maternal instincts, is we are dating to marry. And 100% we have to get rid of that, and that's something I've learned and I used to disagree with. But dating to marry just gives you so much anxiety, and I was constantly thinking about the future and like where it's going to go and anything that could potentially wreck this like perfect image that I've imagined in my head, and that was so stressful. And when things did go wrong, it was like, what? This is not part of the plan. And I think what's supposed to happen is that we date for the present. Like, just enjoy what you have in the moment. Like, there is no point feeling anxious about things that haven't happened yet when you're being given something really fun and really cool at the time. Like, don't take it for granted. I think I definitely was just thinking about the next thing and the next thing. Dating to marry doesn't work. I think dating in the present, still with the idea of, like, you want it to work forever, hopefully. But, like, if it goes, it goes, and that's fine. It's a screening process. It was like, everyone's supposed to come for a purpose, and they've probably just served their purpose, or you've served yours, and now it's time for them to go and you to meet someone else, or for you to have some time alone, or whatever it could be. Like, we are so young, so like I'm not really scared of people coming in and out of my life anymore, because I know each person's going to add value in some sense of the word. So the worst thing that could happen if you're being your authentic self is that they don't like it and they leave. And 100% that is not the worst thing in the world, or definitely not, because it's fate. Like, there is nothing you could have done or do that's going to change fate. If God does not want you with that person in 2 years' time, there is going to be something that happens that will get rid of them, whether you like it or not. That is the best thing I've learned, is everything's out of my control. No amount of overthinking, anxiety, love that I could have given that was going to prevent what happened. So now it's just a case of, let me just enjoy what I get when I get it. Another thing that I'm working on with everyone right now is to say less. I speak a lot, and in arguments, I feel very like I have to over-explain, and like I just keep talking. And like, especially in the relationship, like there would be a lot of silence, and I felt the need to fill it because I was anxious. I was just on edge the whole entire time, if I'm being honest. And I know why, but like I needed to be more basically just shut up. And I'm doing it with everyone. Like, I'm trying to just take a back seat and listen more and just like process. I think my issue is like growing up, I've always felt like wasn't quite heard, or like in friendship groups, like I wasn't heard. So now I feel like I need to speak really quick to get my point in. But I also process really slow, like so slow. So I think I need to just like, I've started to have like friends around me and just explain to them, like, I just need a minute, like, especially in an argument, like say something quite quick, like I just need a minute to really process what you've said. And that's why I say like you should always write things down, or like wait 72 hours after an argument or whatever, because you do need to think about things. And there's so many things that I wish I could have just like thought about a bit longer, come back with such a better response, and like maybe I would have been understood better, or the situation would have been resolved quicker. I don't know, but yeah, I had a bad habit of like bumbling my words and getting all like really stressed out. So that's definitely something I can take away from it. I want to talk about the pedestal. I feel like this is probably a very common thing that people can relate to, but romanticizing someone is terrifying. Don't do it. Don't put someone on the pedestal, because no one deserves to be on a pedestal, no matter how nice they are. Do not put anyone on a pedestal, because again, it creates that power imbalance, and you will probably ignore loads of bad things that are happening, push it under the rug, or avoid confrontation. And I did that probably throughout majority of the relationship, and tried to hide maybe half, put them on the pedestal, and then one day I was like, no, kind of like found a sense of self, I guess, and boundaries and everything. And then I took them off the pedestal and I realised, actually, I don't like XYZ. So I'd start calling XYZ out and set new boundaries, and then we'd clash because different styles of communication and understanding and stuff. And then I set too many boundaries. So I think the biggest thing, if you are having to set too many boundaries, this person is not meant for you and probably does not respect you in that sense, because you shouldn't have to set so many boundaries. A lot of them are common sense. A lot of them is just a sign of like security and respect. There should be maybe like, I don't know, 4 or 5 where it's like, oh, okay, like you view something in a different way to I do, so we need to like establish a boundary there. That's fine. But when you're having to set so many, one, you're going to piss the other person off and like push them away because it's like unobtainable for them. But 2, like you shouldn't be having to do that. So drop that first of all. So that was kind of my thing, was once I come off the pedestal, then I made the mistake of like, well, now we've got too many like rules and restrictions, and the stuff I was setting wasn't unreasonable, but to get it all at once probably was quite overwhelming, and used to having me there being like not really wanting to bring up confrontation, then all of a sudden coming up with it was probably like a big change. But definitely take the person off the pedestal, and then as I've spoke about before, like it's okay to then grieve that person, because once I took them off the pedestal, I still really like valued that person and was like, okay, it's still great. But towards the end, I would say I was starting to feel a bit different, and definitely at the end, kind of a bit complicated, but I literally was I did not recognise this person. It was not the person that I like loved or liked, and the stuff that was coming out, or like the way they might have carried themselves or anything, I just was like, okay, that might be the new version of you and I'm going to have to respect that. But I don't think I personally need to be involved in that, because it's not the same morals, it's not the same person, and it's not the vibe that I'm on. That was probably the hardest part out of everything. Not having the breakup was the breakup. I'd been anxious the whole time, so I think I was kind of prepared for it. So it didn't really hit me that hard as I thought it was going to. That's what I mean. I don't think time really means anything. I think it's how you're kind of treated and stuff. But what hurt the most was seeing 2 versions, so it's a very different version. Someone I did not recognise, and very, very different. And that is okay. You can love the old version of them and you don't have to love the new version. You can respect that new version. You can respect that person, but you personally do not need to be involved with that. But you need to let people make their poor decisions. If something bad has happened, they've made a really bad choice, you have to understand that, like, yes, you are a partnership, but you're also still individuals, and sometimes, as always, we're going to make bad choices and things. If that person made a bad choice, it's personal, it has nothing to do with you. Never take anything personally. I think that's when people get upset over breakups and stuff. I think you have to realise it's their stuff and their journey. Maybe they needed to do that to find themselves. They needed to go through like a down to get up, or an up to get down. I don't know, but that's all their stuff, and you just have to accept that the version you loved doesn't really exist. There's a new version making different life choices that's going to take them on a different path. You do not need to follow that path, because guaranteed it's not lining up with your life and it's not respecting your values or anything. I think for me that was kind of because I did value this person so much. I think that's why I trust God so much. God had to do something big for me to be like, oh, okay, new chapter of my life. So unfortunately bad things happen, shit happens, but it's not personal. I know there was nothing more I could have done to prevent it. That was fate. It was always going to happen in some sense of the word, but I will never take it personally, because I know that it's not my bad decisions, and it's taken me on a very different route. People have to make bad decisions to then get up, then good for them, but personally you don't need to involve yourself. People change and that's okay. Like, I think the most important thing is stop trying to mould someone into your perfect person, because this is the thing, is we all have a bad habit of meeting someone we really like and trying to mould either ourselves or them to like really work. And as I say about the jigsaw puzzle, like, if it's not fitting, it's not fitting, and it can be so hard to accept, but you don't want to have to do that, because someone else doesn't want to change and you would not want to change that much, so why are you forcing it? Like, it should never feel forced. It should come naturally, because Like I say, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Okay, this person doesn't match you. There'll be someone out there that does, that you don't have to like train or like change or mould, and they don't have to mould or train you. And it's okay, like if you aren't compatible, you aren't compatible. If you've got different understanding and communication styles, that is literally fine. Accept it and just let it go, because there's so many people out there that will have not like your perfect match. I don't think that exists, but I think more tailored to you, and someone that's gonna help you to grow and like is gonna benefit you more in the way that you need. Because a lot of people come into my life that have benefited me, but maybe not in the way that I need. Like, it's not like a match. It's like, oh, okay, you're just putting things on top of me, which is like great, but I want someone to kind of like interlink that really like fits the things that I need, and I can fit the things that they need. But sometimes you meet people and like, you know, you're benefiting each other, you're adding things on top of each other, but you're not like aligning with each other, and that's okay. I think another thing as well to remember, because obviously I've been in a relationship pretty much like my whole like teenage life, and now I'm not, it's kind of like really peaceful for me, like being alone. I think because I was so intense in that, being quite young, and with all of these different like things, it's quite nice to be alone. And I definitely preach like everyone should be alone for a bit of their life, because that's when you really find yourself and you realise that you don't crave this like companionship, and you don't need to be seeing anyone or anything for like validation. If you can truly just sit there alone, you know that like you've got your back. So anyone else that now comes in is like a benefit and a bonus to you, but you don't need it. You don't need to be going out every night and stuff. And I personally think if you've got a sense of security, then go out and date. Like, everyone's different. I feel like you don't have to. I feel society really pushes it, and like I know a lot of people are like, oh, so like you're gonna go out and date, and it's like, no, like I'm just gonna breathe and pause for a second. And like now I've found a sense of security, I feel a lot more like I know myself better, and I know what type of people are going to benefit and add to me. So like I know what to look for now, whereas before I still wasn't quite sure. And I feel like that's where you get trapped into like attracting all these like wrong people that you probably didn't need to like even talk to in that era of your life. So I do think if you're strong enough, like it'd be good to just like completely take a step back, find your sense of security, and then do what you will. I feel like if you have to kind of like jump to the next and the next and the next for a bit of validation or something, there's something not quite healed, and there could be a little bit of an insecurity or something. It's not the case for everyone, but I just do think that if you have to jump, like if you can't be alone, and I'm not saying jump from relationships, it could be like even just like a bit of validation or attention, like then there's something not quite right there, and you just need time alone to realise you don't need that. You don't need validation apart from validating yourself from within, and then you're set for life. Not taking things personally. If someone makes a bad choice, someone says a bad thing, it's on them, it's nothing to do with you. You just have to make sure that you are good and that the people you're with match and genuinely match. Don't be morphing or changing yourself, changing them. You just have to make sure your energies actually match. No matter how much you like that person, it will be easier to walk away from someone that's not fitting in your jigsaw puzzle, or is giving you anxiety, or isn't communicating, or not making you feel secure and like on top of the world. Like, these are all things that you want to be feeling in a relationship, not like uncertainty and like, oh, I'm not quite sure. Like, if you're feeling that for like a while, then, and it hasn't been addressed and it hasn't been reassured or sorted, then I don't understand how much you think it's going to just disappear in thin air, because from my experience, it doesn't. Anxiety will always stick until it is healed and resolved. And if that person can't do that for you, then I feel like you're just always going to have it around. I think just be okay with like, chapters do end, and that is fine. I think there's some things that probably didn't need to go down the way they did, but I'm big enough to be like, again, they might have had to make those choices to do what they want to do. For me, I just walk away knowing I gave absolutely like everything, and fate took its fate and was going to do this no matter what I did. And that's the mindset you want to have for every situation, not in a negative way, in like an exciting way of, I'm going to give my all into this, and if it works, it works, and if not, then I had a great time and I've probably learned fuckloads out of it. So that's what I'm doing now, is throwing myself into each situation, because a lot of people say to me like, oh, like, would you, like, I bet you wouldn't like go as hard as you did again. No, I'd go harder this time, because I like loving and I like giving all my energy, because I know that the right job, the right friends, the right person will stick for me or will like reciprocate it. And if it doesn't, it makes the screening process easier. I learn something and I move on. And that's kind of what I took away from it, was it was never a personal thing. I've taken away that there's definitely things I can improve on, as I spoke about today, and that helps me to grow, so that's great. There's things that the other person definitely could have worked on as well, so there's so much to learn, and I like that, and I feel like that could have helped you guys to like relate to some of these things, or be like, oh yeah, I do that, shouldn't do that, or yeah, that happened to me, why did I let that slide? You know what I mean? So I feel like don't ever look back and like cringe at yourself, because you were an old version of yourself. Like, you would maybe let XYZ happen back then, but you wouldn't now. And that's the key, is like, look at the progress you've made. Like, you can be so angry at yourself and be like, why didn't I do this or say this? But it's done now, it's in the past, there's nothing you can do to change. Even if you did say something back then, it wouldn't have changed fate was gonna happen. So that is the key, is just stop being so attached to everything. Be completely a free spirit and just flow where God takes you, and have fun with it. Just have fun in life and don't take things so seriously and personally. And I promise you, you'll be happy and you'll never get offended. You'll never take things to heart and you'll be fine. I think obviously there's still like, have some boundaries and some levels of respect for yourself, because when someone has done something bad, 100% I'm not putting up with that. And that is important, but once you've like put that boundary down and like left that situation and be like, that's not for me, don't keep thinking about it, just be like, it's done, like nothing personal with me, I'm just not dealing with that. And then you can move on way more freely, and I promise you, you'll have a way more peaceful life. We'll get into more details and things, and I'm gonna get my friends on, and then any like specific questions or like relationship advice I would love to share and help. I'm no master like at all, but I just feel like I probably have a bit more to say now that could really help people. I think the relationships bring out the best and worst in us. That's when we really see who we are and what to work on and what are amazing traits of ours. And I feel like a lot of people at our age are looking to date and get in relationships, so it's so important that you understand yourself and the other person, and don't be playing the blame game, the victim game, or like shouting and getting so heated and revenge and all this bad energy. You just want free and good energy to flow. So it's important that you like learn about relationships and people and yourself first before you go diving in and cause chaos. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this, hopefully it gives some insight, and I'll see you in another episode.